Welcome to another episode of the Being Better Everyday podcast, where once in a while I talk to other moms juggling all the things. Today, I am inviting Kayla from the Leadership Unveiled podcast. She's a Minnesota mom with soon-to-be 3 littles who, like me, manages a full-time job while running her passion project on the side. The Leadership Unveiled podcast focuses on career growth, leadership tips, productivity, and organization strategies. So, as you can imagine, we have a lot to talk about because these are things that I'm also passionate about as well. So, welcome to the Being Better Everyday podcast, where we make your days more peacefully productive while you're juggling all the things. I'm your host, Julie Wenslick, a millennial mom, finance professional, and founder of P&W Designs. I know that as a mom, business owner, corporate girly, or a combination of all three like myself, sometimes life can feel like a lot. With the simplicity and systems to being better every day, we create habits and routines that support your life, create calm in the chaos, and put the you back in your everyday. So grab those headphones, put on your shoes, and join me on a walk while we dig into today's episode. So, welcome, Kayla.
Thank you.
First things first, we met a couple of years back, which I'm thinking it was like 5 years ago because I think we were pregnant around the same time. And we were both at the time doing network marketing. We have obviously since stayed in touch and similarly kind of had run like parallel lives from a business perspective. And we've only met once in person, even though we're only, a half an hour away from each other?
Probably. I know, we have to do it more.
But obviously Zoom is definitely more convenient. So here we are. For those on video, we are over on YouTube. Otherwise, you're certainly listening to this on your favorite podcast platform. So obviously, we always start with just an introduction. So, who are you? Where are you from? Obviously, I would say age of your kids as well, or, almost kids. And then, what do you do in corporate America?
Well, thanks for having me, Julie. I like your intro because thinking about like going for a walk with you, that's something I also want to do more now that it's nice out. So we maybe should do that together.
Don't jinx us on the time of recording this. It's been nice, right?
I know it did snow like 2 days ago, I think, for like a brief moment. But yeah, so I'm Kayla. I'm from Wisconsin originally. So I'm from Southeast Wisconsin, like Kenosha. I always have to qualify it. I always say like the county, not the city, because people think of like that 70s show or some of the bad things that happened in the last few years in Kenosha. Right. But that's where it was filmed, the 70s show.
I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm from. And then I did school here at the U in Minnesota. And then I just never moved back because, my mom's from Chicago and my dad was from like rural Wisconsin. So when I moved up here, when I toured the campus, I was like, okay, I love it because I can like go downtown and like see a show and like be near the city if I want, kind of like going to Chicago, or I can just like drive through a cornfield and like roll with the windows open and like, play my music. And that was like how I grew up. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I just stayed. So yeah. And then I married him and my husband in college, although we were just friends, we were lab partners. And then, and we lived in the same dorm, and then we didn't date until after. So when he was in med school afterwards, he reached out to me on Facebook and we started chatting. So that was kind of cool. Yeah. So we've been friends for a long time. We got married 7, almost 8 years ago and been together for, I guess, 10 or 11 years now. And then, we have 2 kids. Our daughter's 5.5, actually.
So it is around the same age.
Yeah. My son's 2.5. And then we have another one coming due at the end of April. So we don't know what that one is yet, which is, I think it's a boy. We'll see. All the scans make me think it's a boy.
Yeah.
But I was wrong every time so far. So.
Were they all surprises? Oh, okay.
Cool. Yeah, it's really cool. So yeah. And then for work, so I work at Health Fairview. So it's a large healthcare system here in Minnesota. And I'm a system program manager. So there's all these weird structures for reporting where it's at one site and then across the system. But essentially I lead I'm a laboratory leader. So I'm a scientist by training. So that's what I went to school for. But now I'm in a management role for a lab. So that's what I do corporate. And I just love leadership. So my side hustle, my other business, Leadership KFA Consulting, or my podcast, Leadership Unveiled Podcast, is all about like leadership, helping professionals stay and get organized. Yeah. I was working out and doing network marketing after Kate was born. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
around
then
the
your
same
daughter
time
is
frame.
just a little bit younger than Kate, right?
So
So,
Danny's
yeah.
turning 5 in April. So
Yeah. Cool.
she's not quite 5, but yeah, I had done over the years a lot of different things outside of my corporate job, but network marketing was one of
Yeah.
them for a while.
Me too. I've had actually the podcast since 2018, but at the time when I first started it, it was called Coffee with Kayla with a K. And then it was eventually then it was like Glow Getters podcast. I've changed it so many times to just kind of
Okay.
like
That's
fit.
the one I remember.
Yeah.
Um, is that
Because that's what all my like network marketing groups, I used to call them like Glow Getters.
well, you definitely have a longer experience in podcasting than, I started mine in September. So,
You're doing pretty
uh,
well. I'm impressed by your YouTube channel. So if anybody's listening, and they haven't checked it out, go watch the videos and it's
plus
great.
we put our makeup on for a reason, right?
I know. I like only put it on for this. Normally I would not.
Exactly. So, from a leadership perspective, how long have you been in a leadership role at your corporate job?
Yeah. Officially I became supervisor slash like a technical specialist. It was like a combined role back in 2015.
Okay.
So yeah, I had been working there for about 2.5-ish, 3 years. I started in 2012 and had always found like little ways to do things that I enjoyed. I was doing like a lot of education and stuff. And then I went back to school and got additional certificates because I can't stop, paying for education. I
I
just
get
really
that
like to
pain.
learn. Yeah. So yeah, it just an opportunity came open. And it was insane. I didn't think I would be in that role for like another 10 years. So I was like, I have like no experience. I mean, I had worked in other places like in retail and grocery stores and restaurants and stuff and had like leadership positions, but nothing professional until then. So yeah, so I guess I was a supervisor starting in 2015. So then, but then as a manager, kind of what I'm doing right now, I've been doing that since Kate was born. I think I went on maternity leave and then came back and started my new job. So like 5.5 years.
And did you, like, when you were promoted to kind of this leadership management position, did you get any formal training internally, or is that part of like why you became so passionate
That's so
about it
funny. No.
externally?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, some companies have like courses you can take and like there's
Yeah.
people you can reach out to and mentors and stuff. But yeah, that was one reason why I sort of leaned into creating the podcast and like started talking about things because I was literally like Pinteresting like how to be a good young professional leader. And it
Yeah.
was like the worst advice. It was like all like old white dudes or
Yep.
like corporate women who were
Yeah.
like
Old
my
school.
boss at the time. Yeah, my boss was like she didn't retire until she was like way beyond retirement age. So she was probably well into her 60s. And I learned a ton from her. Like she was amazing, but I didn't see anybody else like represented as like a millennial who wanted to do things like me. So yeah, I was like super burnt out at the beginning and like worked crazy hours and stuff. And then I was like, that's so unsustainable. Like there's got to be a different way. So I just started talking about it and yeah, yeah, that's how I
I
was born.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why even on our podcast, I tend to talk about working in corporate America because the the practices that have been modeled for us by other generations aren't necessarily how we want to live our lives.
It's true.
And so for me, it's been even helpful to see and hear from other leaders who believe in transparency and balance because I think,
Mhm.
the leadership that I grew up with is very much you owe your life to your corporate job and you are expected to work day in and day out, and they still do, right? They're
Mhm.
working 7 days a week and
Yeah.
70, 80 hours a week at least, and I have found through systems, productivity, that I can get what I need to get done, be a high performing person, and still not work like they work.
Yeah. Yeah, like leave a little bit in the tank for you and like everything else. Like work isn't the
Family.
only thing that we're doing. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember vividly when I was still working in the lab as like a tech. My boss at the time was um I worked evening shift. Actually, I worked some shift work, and I would leave at like 11 and she'd still be there. And I know she'd show up at like 7:30 in the morning. And I think like, is that necessary?
Right.
Like, why? And I always kind of wondered, like, is that what that we're expected to do that? And I remember thinking like, I never want her job, which is
Yep.
funny because I ended up having her job at some point. Like now I'm in the same role she was in then, but I leave on time. Like I'm not sticking around till 11 p.m. and working like, I don't know, what would that be? Like a
A lot of
16,
hours.
yeah, 7 to 7 plus, 4 hours.
Yeah.
So 16
15
hour
hour.
day on
Yeah.
purpose, like every day? No, not possible.
Yeah. And I think the thing that proves it too is that you're still showing up, growing your professional career, and showing that there's balance in that. And I know balance is always one of those
Yeah,
like
it's
taboo
hard.
words, but whatever you
Yeah.
want to call not owing your life to a corporate job.
Yeah. And I think in like leadership too, especially when you're in I know healthcare is different in terms of like, okay, so I have to be there super early because that's when we start serving patients and stuff. But everybody has their own experience where I think you can you can try to build in a little flexibility if you are really efficient with your time. Like I think if you show your boss that you can get done without them having to like micromanage you and all that, you can leverage that for a more flexible schedule. So I don't know. I don't think it has to be so rigid. I know modeling leaving on time and trying to do those things for my team, I think they're still kind of like, we're it's okay if we like sign off. I'm like, yeah, like I am showing you the way. Like this is how I think it's going to be more sustainable for you in the long term. And I still work with other leaders that on my team who are different generation than me that think that maybe they have to prove to me that they're like loyal. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
like it's fine. Like just get your work done. And I think you're awesome. I don't need your loyalty really. It's yeah, I don't know. It's just a new way of thinking.
Well, and the real thing is get your work done,
Just
right?
get your work done and I'll give
Yeah.
you all my trust and all the freedom and everything. But yeah, if you don't get your work done and I have to hear about it, like, okay, then we have to like figure something out. But like I'll extend my hand and hopefully, you know, help you create systems to be efficient so then you can leave on time and know like it'll be there tomorrow. It'll always be there tomorrow.
So with your job, I would assume being in the science and healthcare realm that you're in
Yeah.
person. Is that correct?
Partially, yeah. So for a while, up till COVID, I was totally in person. And then um, there were times when I could work remote, like a day here and there. I would work from home and it would be rare. But after COVID, we just reorged the office space and everything. I actually don't have an
Yep.
office anymore. So I just have this laptop. I just take
Yep.
it around with me. But also my team members who do have desks, um, I also allow them to work remote part-time. So we try to make sure it's a balance of like being there for the team. So since I'm leading the leaders, my job really is to like, yeah, connect with their people, but more connect with them and make sure the leaders feel supported. So I go on site like between 2 and 3 times a week now. And
Okay.
it keeps changing. Like it changes all the time based on the need. Like if I have a leader who's going through a growth season or like they've got a big project, like I'll be there on site to connect with them more. Or like I have somebody right now who just does better with in-person one-on-one. So I like intentionally just go in that day to see them, even though everyone else seems to do really well with like a Teams meeting, virtual.
Yeah.
So I change it up, but I'm just very clear with where I'm at. Um, like in my calendar, I say like I'm on site and where I'm at. I manage a few different locations. So I just like get in my car and go wherever I'm needed. But a lot of my lab leaders, they don't have that choice. They have to be there.
Right.
Um, but I let them know like if there's specific deep work or you've got a deadline or you're not feeling well or your kids have a thing, like just work from home, but just like be really intentional and tell the people that you're
Yeah.
working
Communicate.
with, like, where are you? Yeah. We did have that issue for a while where people were like thinking that the leaders weren't working because they couldn't be seen. So I think you do have to be careful with that and just be like, no, I'm obviously working. And
I
this is
think
how you can reach me.
that's kind of been the biggest shift for me that I've seen, pre-COVID versus post-COVID, is the shift of trust. And
Mhm.
there was definitely, even in my office, pre-COVID, the area president would do laps in the office on Friday afternoons and to see who was still working and
That's
to
so unhealthy.
like check and make sure that people are there. And I think the
Wow.
difference is like that was just really butt and seat, right? That doesn't mean they're productive. That doesn't mean they're
Yeah. Doesn't mean you're
actually
doing anything.
there. And now, I mean, my management is now based out of Chicago. So I
Mm.
don't actually have any local management, but it's 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 about the deliverables, and I have very concrete deadlines and ways
Yeah.
of showing up, and if they know that I'm doing that work, then they leave me alone, right? So,
Yeah. I love that.
I mean, not all of us can have that luxury, right? But
Right.
when
It's true.
when we do, it's really nice. Obviously on the podcast, Being Better Everyday podcast, we focus on simple systems, strategies, and just being a little bit better every day. So what would that mean,
Yeah.
or what does that mean to you, right? Because it's going to mean something different to
Yeah.
everyone.
Well, I always think of like the 1% better thing.
Hmm.
So to me, that's what I think of is just like every day, like is a new opportunity to just do a little bit better. And I think for a while, when I first started in leadership and I was burning out, I thought I had to do like a 180 and like become like an expert in like a day. And then I was like, okay, that's not possible or sustainable. And so did a lot of like reading and came across that 1%. And I love what you have for your business, the being better every day concept, which so to me, it just means like just make tiny tweaks and shifts. I love the book Atomic Habits by James
Yeah.
Clear because he talks about that a lot. And like atomic being like the smallest amount the smallest amount of change you can make. So yeah, when I first started in my leadership role at work and then started creating systems for like kind of, am I meeting all my goals? Am I doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing? I had to like define what success meant for me because I thought success meant like having all the answers and like always being available and like nobody ever had a question. And I thought of everything before everyone else thought of everything. It was like essentially just controlling everything.
Yeah.
And then I redefined it as like, no, like showed up, I was present, I listened more than I talked. I had a very like clear set of things I had to do each day. And then also it was sort of think about prioritization of my work. Like success didn't mean like checking every to-do list item every day because I would never. I probably have hundreds of to-do list items every year. So it meant more like just making progress on the right things. So like what type of strategic work should I be working on? So I would kind of come up with a list of 1 to 3 things that I wanted to work on. And then at the end of every day for a while, I did like a self reflection and I was like, was I present? Did I get triggered at all? Like did someone say something and I was like, oh, and I have to control it? Or was I like, okay. And did I get more curious? Did I just start kind of asking questions and try to figure that out? Like, how was my presence? Did I really work on the things that I wanted to work on? Did I overschedule myself? So it was kind of these tiny shifts to be better every day by asking myself questions about like, yeah, how I was showing up and then how I felt at the end of the day. And like, I don't know if you ever get that feeling where you're like, oh, I feel like I did something wrong. I feel kind of icky.
Yes.
Like, what is it? What is it?
So there's two things I want to talk about with this, because
Yeah.
I do want to get into your system that you've created to help, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but kind of around that planning and information. We will get into that. But one of the
Yeah.
things you said was checking yourself of whether you've been triggered. And it's not something I've talked about yet on the podcast, but for a long time in my 20s, I had that emotional reaction
Mm-hmm.
to feedback, to adjustments, whatever. Obviously, I was growing in my career, I was presenting to clients and taking everything very personally. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's I want you to kind of talk about that too, because I'm guessing you've had to do a lot of growth there too. In your
Mm-hmm.
20s, it's very easy to, as you're growing in your career, to look at it as a direct reflection of who you are. And I think as I've grown in my career, I've realized, I'm confident in who I am and who I at in my career, right? Like I know that
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at my job, but also I've also realized that their feedback I may not have to align to it. Like it's just
Yeah.
their feedback, their belief, and I can listen to it, decide if it's a part of who I am, and
Mm-hmm.
if it's not, kind of acknowledge it and move on and not internalize that information. So
Oh, yeah.
talk a little bit about that because like you said, it's something that I still struggle with certain individuals in my corporate job where I've at this point with the history basically doing what I can to not interact with certain individuals
Mm-hmm.
because of that kind of triggering. But, just overall, what does that look?
Yeah. Oh my
Have you
gosh, so
had to
many
do that work
things.
too?
Yeah. So I feel like you touched on like 3 or 4 things. So one of them is just like, what do you do when you feel like you might be getting triggered? Which I'll talk about like the pause. And then two, like whose opinion really matters. That makes me think of Brene Brown's like Daring Greatly book and the quote that she uses. It's the Teddy Roosevelt speech where he talks about like how essentially to summarize it, it's like there's a person in the ring, the man in the ring, and they're doing the work and they're like the one daring greatly, like they're taking the risks. And the people in the audience, if they want to boo at you or throw tomatoes at you or like criticize you, maybe it's not worth listening in their opinion because they're not actually in your shoes. Like they're not willing to walk with you and do that thing. So what I've had to learn is like not everyone's opinion is weighted the same.
Yeah,
Some
that's a
people
good way of
say like
putting it.
not everyone's matter, but it's tough. I think we're always going to care what people think about us or what we want them to think we're doing the right things. So the part you mentioned with self-confidence, it's kind of 2 parts. It's the knowing that I'm doing things with the best of intentions always, right? Like I always try to assume people are doing things with the best intentions, especially if I'm like, why are they doing that? Kind of like how someone might be doing that to me. Like, okay, if they're well intentioned, like what might they be thinking? So yeah, assuming that I'm a good person too, right? Like if I am doing things that I like in my values, like whether it's work or home, like okay, so I think I'm a good person. Okay, cool. Do I make mistakes? Yeah, sometimes I mess up. So I'm also a human. So that's like the third part. Like I'm a human and it's very possible that I messed up here. But also like I know I do a really freaking good job at this job. Like I do know what I'm doing. So over time that confidence builds. But when you're in your 20s and you're new, you're like trying to prove that you're like the best and perfect and you know everything. And now I think, yeah, as being in this role for so long, being 33, I'm going to be 34 this year, a lot of the people that I'm now hiring are like 22, where I was. And there's just this like wisdom that comes over time where you're like, no, I've been around, like I've seen a lot of these things. Like I don't know everything, but I can feel pretty confident in like what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And also you have more mentors, people that are in the ring with you too, like talking to someone trusted at work, like not your bestie that you like vent about work, but
We all
like
have those.
somebody, right? Yeah. But somebody that you trust that you can go to and be like, okay, so I know you know what I'm doing and you've maybe done the same thing. Like, did I error here or am I thinking about this right? I'll do that a lot when I have a leader I'm working with who I'm like questioning what they're doing before I like approach them and sort of ask more. I'll talk to somebody I trust and be like, okay, so here's kind of like my perception of this. Like, am I seeing the whole thing or am I like, do I have like a blind spot? Like, is there anything else? Um, so yeah, it's the confidence, the checking yourself too before you go and get judged or triggered or make assumptions. And then the not weighing everybody's opinions the same. Like, my mom does not listen to this podcast, so I'll just share this. She doesn't understand always what I do for work. So I remember when I went back to school for my master's degree, she was like, "What are you doing that for? Like, that's ridiculous." And I was like, "I love to learn. It's something that's going to like fuel me in this season. I might need it later. I might not, but I just think it'd be a good growth opportunity." And sure, it's really expensive. In hindsight, maybe I could have gone to a cheaper school.
That's how I feel about my undergrad.
Yeah. She didn't understand. And I took that, like, I felt so guilty about it. Like, I was like, oh my God, like she's judging me for this, doing this. Right. But then in my corporate work, my leaders who are that I'm working with, they have their master's degree. And they're like, "Oh, it's so cool that you decided not to do your MBA and you did your public health degree because you have a slightly different perspective and you can still learn all the finance stuff that you need in your role by experience." Like, that's so cool. I'm like, okay, so maybe I weight my, VP's opinion a little bit more than my mom's.
Right.
So if you are feeling triggered, I think just pausing before you react. And that is hard to learn.
Yeah.
It's more like you have to really think about it and be like, okay, and then getting curious rather than getting defensive. And that is definitely something I've had to work on. And when I see leaders that get defensive right away, I'm like, oh, okay, you have a little growth to do. That's okay.
Yeah, that what I would say, especially for somebody who is a perfectionist, that one's always hard, right? Is just like pausing and, okay, they're not attacking my character. They're observing something that we could be better at, right? Okay, so talk about your, back to systems organization, kind of prioritizing things. Talk about what you've created to help with that.
So yeah, my system is called Leader Standard Work. And actually it's a lean term, but I created a Leader Standard workbook. So like a planner for it.
Pause. What's a lean term?
Lean. Oh, so lean is like a way of thinking that's used in manufacturing, but it's also repurposed in a lot of other businesses like healthcare.
Okay.
So lean is just a system that Toyota created where they kind of look at a process from like end to end, and then they evaluate it and they get rid of all the non-value added steps. So it's just a way to become like more and more efficient.
I feel like I do that in everything
quality
in my career, but okay.
It applies like everywhere. I think it's why it works for managing your time as a leader or professional, because essentially what Leader Standard Work is really in basic terms is just like it can be a template or a visual aid that's essentially like a habit tracker for your work. And then what you do with that is you can see all your meetings, all your appointments, all your work. You can look at it and see, like, am I booked? Like for me, I know when I started out, I would have like 90% of my day booked with meetings. And then I'm like, when am I supposed to do work? So I learned to level load my schedule. I learned to make time for more highly visible projects and not worry about some of the details, because that got me further and made me more visible, and that helped me get promoted. And then it also helped me do that daily reflection I was talking about, because there's a spot usually on the tool to see like, oh, I didn't go to like any of these meetings, or I didn't get any of these things done. I must have overscheduled myself. So it's super basic and simple, and it's customizable too. So I started using one for myself, and I kept tweaking it based on my job over time. And then it was like teaching it to my leaders that I was leading. And then this last year at work, I led it was a year-long leadership development course and deployed it there to, I think we have like 55 supervisors. It's really cool. So now they're like using it. Mine was on paper when I first started. Now that's like in Excel, and they have like hyperlinked things like clicking to time cards and like clicking to their whatever they have to be doing. So it's really cool. It's essentially being managing yourself, self-management in a visual way. So it's not all up here. And that's something you always talk about, is like getting it out of your head and onto paper or digital or whatever. Like if it's all up here, it's
just
like
gonna busy your brain.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I was overwhelmed too when I first started, because I was like, I should be doing all the things. And you kind of just like then don't know what to do and you don't do any of them, especially
Yeah.
if you're a perfectionist, you procrastinate. So that's my system in a nutshell.
Well, and I think it helps with, I look at the leaders in the organization that I work with, and so many of them are back-to-back meetings 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And implementing some sort of system like that to help manage and even advocate to their management about having the time to get work done. There's so many, I mean, I probably know more professionals that are booked back to back 8 hours a day than not, right? I am not
Yeah.
with my job because of how it works, but most of the people I work with are, right? And especially
Yeah.
on the executive level.
It helps you be proactive, because if you're not tracking it and you're overwhelmed, you can't ever pause to advocate or be like, I need a change. You just keep going until you burn out and need like a week off.
Yes.
So so this tool helped me, and it helps my leaders too be able to say like, hey boss, like I need help, or like, hey, I am thinking maybe I don't need to attend this meeting, or like what would it look like if I didn't go to these set of meetings that would give me an hour back every day? I could get XYZ done. And now you are improving your communication, building trust, making more space for you to do like actual work. It's amazing. You look highly accountable, even if you're like failing, quote unquote, in your mind, because you're ahead of it. Instead of a month later, your boss is like, hey, so you're kind of like missing deadlines and I'm having to remind you about stuff. And like you seem kind of like all over the place.
And then but with your
Yeah.
system, you're able to prove, here's my system,
Yeah.
here's my work, here's how I'm managing my
I
time.
literally
Yeah.
can send it to my boss and be like, here's what I'm working on. Does this feel aligned with what you think I should be working on? And then she can tell me yes or no. And same thing with me with my leaders. When they say they're struggling, I'm like, okay, show me what you're working on. And then I'll go through and be like, low priority, low priority, low priority. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. They're like,
Yeah.
okay. I'm like, so you have permission to like not work on this and work on just this. They're like, oh, okay. I feel better about that.
I think that's been the thing that I've seen too, is transparency when in management of, it's really hard for, you would think it's not, but it's really hard for managers to understand what their direct reports are working on if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have some sort of system where they're not having to babysit you, right? So in this case, it's not, right?
Yeah.
You have the system. It's an easy accountability without having to spend, being micromanaged, basically.
Exactly. And I think people are at first resistant to doing this. Like they don't like tracking their time for whatever reason, because I think they're afraid to show that they're inefficient with it. But actually, once you start like writing all the things down that you do and sort of tracking it, you just become more efficient. It's kind of like if you had to keep a food diary.
Yeah.
You like don't want to write down that you ate like 8 Snickers or like 5 Cadbury eggs. Not speaking from experience or anything. Right? So then you just maybe don't eat as many Cadbury eggs, right? So same thing with your time. If you're like, oh, I was just planning for 15 minutes for this huddle, but it actually takes 30 minutes every day. I'm going to actually say it's 30 minutes, right?
Mhm.
And then now you can adjust and be like, this is what's actually happening. And so I wish people wouldn't be as resistant and they would just try it, and they'll see a huge return from it. I think you'll be like exponentially more productive if you're actually just very aware of what you're doing instead of not having a plan. And I think that's what you always talk about is like, let's actually have a plan.
Yeah, for sure. So all great information. Obviously, we're both very passionate about leadership. For those who want to learn more, where can people find you? Where do you show up? All the things.
Yeah. I would say two main places. So my website has a ton of info on it, including freebies. There's even a free leader standard work template on there. And then I have a free organized in 30 days course that I just put up there.
I saw that.
So yeah, that's a good way to get to know me really quick, because I have videos like for every day from what I posted. So my website is kfaconsulting.org. So check that out. And then I'm not super great at Instagram, although I'm trying. So I would say, but I'm at KFA Consulting on there as well. But I show up very consistently on YouTube, and I'm at Kayla Fahey-Ahrndt on there. But if you search my name, you'll find me.
Well, and we'll link them on the show notes as well. And I think I always end up tagging. You have multiple Instagrams. So
I do.
I always end up
I need
tagging
to
the
slow
wrong
it down.
one.
I'm like a creative soul, so I like start all these accounts, but I can never. Yeah, Instagram's not my thing as much, but I'm trying. So, but KFA Consulting is where I'm at.
And again, you've shown up for YouTube on YouTube for years as well. So definitely a lot of information on there. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining the podcast. And I can't wait to flip the script and, do the other side of it. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Being Better Everyday podcast. To see any visuals, head over to my YouTube channel. Links, socials, and resources mentioned can always be found in today's show notes. I truly appreciate you leaving a rating and review to help me reach more women looking to build systems to be peacefully productive. If you are looking for more, you can always find me on Instagram at julie.pwdesigns, sharing the behind the scenes of my everyday life as a millennial mom, corporate girly, and small business owner. Until next time, keep on taking one step at a time towards your version of being better every day.